Hello, everybody. This is Peter Palmiotti of Human Art Studio. And today is a special. It's my 600th episode, 600th video up on YouTube. I do have a few that are those I've done in the past. So I've actually done more than 600 videos. And I'm no video wizard, but I think there's a lot of great material for people to see and check out. So if you go just check out all my past videos. I've got different playlists and that you can go see. Welcome everyone. If you like what I do and you aren't subscribed, as you can see with the ticker tape, trying to get to my goal of 1,000 subscribers. I got a few more since last time I've been around. So thank you everybody who has. If you haven't hit that button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any streams as they pop up. Also like this video so it can get seen by more people across the YouTube universe. And today I wanted to do something a little special. I'm not going to, it's like I thought about like grabbing a lot of artwork throughout my career and, books I've worked on and then I thought about it. It's like I'm already too busy. I got a lot on my plate. So I'm just going to kind of keep it simple and just see what highlights I remember as I talk to you today. So, maybe at some point I'll do a real hardcore edited video. So if you didn't already know, I am working on my comic. This is retro. This is page 22. First issue will be 28 pages. And I'm working on this. This is my first real creator-owned project, and really happy with it so far. It's going slow, but if you make comics, you know the dealio. Take time, and while I wish I had all the time in the world to work on my own personal project, I got to make a living. And I'm not going to get into current events. That will be my next stream. But I will mention one thing. I currently have a fire sale. So if you go to any of my social media, specifically Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, you can see a link to a Dropbox I have. And I've collated and collected a lot of comic pages and random art I've done in recent years and put it all in my Dropbox there that you can go check out and see if you like anything. I just recently sold. I had a recent-ish cover of Exo Manowar I did for Valiant. It was a really nice cover, penciled by Barry McLean that I inked. And that's gone. And I took it out of the Dropbox. So as I sell pieces, I'll be doing that. So nobody goes there, sees something they like, and say, "Hey, I want that," and oops, it's not available. I don't think I'll be adding any more comic pages soon, but I might drop in some artwork because I'm trying to do some finished pieces of my own. So you might see things pop up if you go there often. And yeah, I mean that's so I can. I'm trying to sell artwork so I can stay on top of my bills, and really do a lot of special things I have in mind. So we'll see how that all goes. It's pretty much a big stack of artwork that I have, and if I even sell like a third of it, that would be very, very nice. And I wouldn't say all this stuff in there is cheap, but I am considering it inexpensive. And it's a fire sale, and I would love to sell it all. I know times are hard for everybody, but if you collect art, or if you want to get a gift for somebody for Christmas, or or whatever holiday you celebrate, then by all means go give it a look and check it all out. A lot of people, I had a number of people that messaged me and said they, wanted something, then went there and didn't see. I guess they were expecting pages from Marvel or DC. I worked for Marvel and DC back in the 90s, and not since then, really. And all that stuff is long gone. I pretty much sold it as I worked on books. I mostly only done Aquaman up at DC and up at Marvel. It was mostly X-Men stuff. I did some Punisher. I did some. What else? I'm trying to think outside of X-Men. I guess it was mostly X-Men. But I'll get into my story time. Because I wanted to mention the artwork. I've just been working like crazy and trying to keep on top of things. This past year was very, very, very challenging. I don't think I've been this it's greatly affected my freelance work. Let us say. But I think there'll be a couple of things before the end of the year that will really put me on track. It's a matter of if things go forward. So it's a wait and see. Meanwhile, busting my ass working on projects and making art and doing commissions. And you could always reach me. Private message me anywhere up on Facebook, Messenger, Twitter, Instagram. Those are the three easiest. Usually check them daily, if not, weekly for sure. Yeah, I have an email, but rarely get any, rarely get business through my email, which is fine. I get enough junk mail through there, as I'm sure most people do. Um, but yeah, just been cracking away. I almost want to keep it light because the November, December gets kind of nuts just naturally. Which took a little time off to focus on stuff. Definitely setting up all that artwork on my Dropbox. Took a couple days. Well, more than a couple of days, but it's definitely a lot of work. But yeah, so to sort of give you highlights of my career just off the bat, I was born in New York, specifically Brooklyn, back in the 1960s, 63 to be specific. And, had mom, pop, and 3 older brothers. And, to a degree, we were all into art. But specifically me and my next brother up, which is Jimmy, who's also in the industry. We read comics growing up. Like I remember getting into comic strips in newspapers back when there were a ton a ton of newspapers. My father used to pick up at least 2 every day, and I always turned to the comic strips first. And that's my earliest memory of getting into comics was through comic strips first. There's a lot of great ones, but both of my parents encouraged our hobby. More so my father, because he had a bit of artistic talent himself. He co-owned a paint store in Manhattan for years and years and years. And he was the one, him and a friend of his owned the store, and he was the one who did all the signs. So he had a bit of a design talent. Um, and at home, I would catch him just doodling while he was hanging out in the living room or something, and he would draw cowboys, cowboys and horses. I remember, and I remember my one of my earliest attempts at just drawing something from my mind was drawing a horse, which I got pretty close for a young guy. And just randomly drew a horse. That was probably before I ever rode a horse or saw one in real life. It was just, saw one on TV, saw pictures in the newspapers or a magazine or whatever. But yeah, like the barbershop was the first place both me and Jimmy ran into comics, and those were like Richie Rich and Archie comics and maybe some Gold Key. Um, And, my father became aware that we loved comics. We read those there and probably randomly picked up some from newsstands or what have you. And my dad took us to our first comic convention, was there was a hotel off the water in Brooklyn, and it wasn't the prettiest place. I remember, and it was actually in the basement. I think it was like the Golden Nugget, or not Golden Nugget. It's like Las Vegas, but Golden something. It was off the water. Where is it? Sheepshead Bay, from my memory. And the basement was creepy and dark and, not well lit. Um, but we ran into George Perez. Like, there was vendors all along the walls, and in the middle of this big wide open space, it wasn't really um, laid out well, was George Perez. And it was awesome to see him. And I was young and shy, but I started talking to him, and I was sort of just hanging out, happy to see him and then watch him draw as he chatted with my brother, um, who was only a year and a half older than me. But my brother was always outgoing, and so they struck up a conversation about comics and making comics and all that. But yeah, I remember my father driving us into Manhattan early on probably a Sunday morning, and took us to what was then the big New York Comic Con. I believe it was Phil Suling, the guy who was running it. And it was a lot of those early days that really got us both heavily into buying comics and collecting comics. And I never considered myself a comic collector per se. I was always an art collector to a degree. It was a couple of years before I actually started reading them. I was very young and more interested in the brightly colored superheroes. But I started reading them. Probably started reading Spider-Man first or something. Seemed like a character I most related with off the bat. I was a young kid in school who got powers. I didn't get powers, but I was in school. But it's like my father encouraged like just us drawing and being into comics, and eventually we both went into high school, him first and then me. And we both decided on the same school. And it's like I knew he went to art and design, and art and design was in Manhattan. And I was still in grade school. But I made it a point, like, I didn't want to just follow in my brother's footsteps. I wanted to do what, I love most. And when I looked at other options, nothing else, I didn't gravitate to anything else. So I did wind up choosing art and design as well. And the benefit of my brother being there is, like, I remember him giving me a few pointers, which, of course, one appreciates. You actually had to take a test to get into the school. So that was fun. It's like not anybody could just go in, and it wasn't based off of grades, although your grades had to be decent. It was more that you showed artistic promise, and I saw what I was up against. Like, wow, my portfolio, which essentially is what you were tested on. Like, you had to put together a portfolio and different sales and different things you can do artistically. I saw others, of other kids trying to get into the school, and while I wouldn't say mine was 100% professional, it definitely wasn't on the low end of, it's like there's kids who love to draw that thought it would be cool to join an art school, but really had no idea of how to put together a decent portfolio. They had drawings, like finished drawings on loose leaf paper with lines, and it was, stuff ripped out of books. So all the edges were, really ripped up, and nothing was neat, and it was like, half drawn pictures and just, very basic stuff. That mine was super elaborate, but, I got in. I was happy to get in. So anyway, it's like, yes, I went to art and design, then, which was 4 years. I had one great teacher, Mr. Ferguson, who really, like, wouldn't accept less than your best. And he only recently passed away, but I was happy while I was working for DC. He showed up at a comic convention, and we'd see him a number of times at comic conventions, and came to my table and sort of, hey, you're working on Aquaman. That's pretty sweet. And it was so cool. It was definitely one of those things, one of those highlights, because not everybody who goes to art school winds up doing anything in art. So it goes. But that was really awesome. I will mention, I also went to college. I only went to college for 2 years before I essentially dropped out. Number of reasons, but mostly because I really wasn't into going to college. I enjoyed it, but after 2 years, I sort of screwed up my own schedule. It took, once I learned I can choose my courses, I took all the art courses and sort of burned myself out. But that's okay. It's like, I had enough of school. I always loved school. I was one of those kids. I was quiet, and um, sort of like my career. I was just happy to be there. Um, I didn't excel, um, but it's like I passed and it was okay. Um, so college had some great points in it. Um, but it was just more the same. It's like art school back then was like you were given a project and then you finish the project, you were given another project. And, there weren't many teachers that really stood out. Like I said, Ferguson was one who really worked with you, came to your desk and looked over what you're doing and gave you helpful hints or made you do it over. Other art teachers sort of fill the quarter. Not all of them, but a lot of them. In grade school, I did have a couple of standout teachers along those lines as well. I remember one math teacher that really stood out, and I was good back then in school. I was good in math. I even skipped a grade at one point because I was really ahead of the curve, and then that screwed me up because then I was behind the curve. Uh, they should always be wary of uh, jumping kids ahead. I, I was I was good at it, but I wasn't a prodigy, and when they put me ahead, then I was completely lost. I was like, "What is everybody else doing here now?" I have no clue. Um, but anyway, it all straightened out in the end. Um, yeah, so I was done with college, and I wasn't really clear on what I wanted to do career-wise. And reason for all this backstory is like I loved comics, I loved art. Um, went to art school, went to college for art. High school was cartooning and animation, and college was advertising. And I loved all of it. I found all of it really interesting. Um, it wasn't as um, there's better art courses and art schools now. Definitely, definitely art and design is a top school. But there's a lot more knowledge to making comics and what goes into them and you know all that stuff than there was back then. But regardless, it's like in college, I found myself shifting directions as when one gets older. Your interests change. You know, uh, lots of people say, "Oh, girls, boys became aware of girls at that age," and so, which was true. I mean, I became aware of girls in grade school, um, but it wasn't that. It was as I do at various points in my life. I really tend to immerse myself completely and utterly in something, and then wanna either relax from that or take a break from that or find something else of interest to dive into. So in college, I got into both a bit of writing and I got into computers to a small degree. Um, I bought my first computer at my local comic shop, which I think comic shop came around probably my mid-teens. I lived just off Flatbush in Avenue J in Brooklyn. Flatlands area for anybody who knows Brooklyn. Not too far from Coney Island, the beach. Um, and so, a local comic shop popped up, and I would go there as often as possible. I loved comics, and I loved there being a local comic shop walking distance away. And really appreciated that I can now, newsstands never had, like, they usually had random issues. Sometimes you'd find, the popular titles issue after issue, but more than likely you couldn't really get get series of books because they would sell out quick and they wouldn't get a ton of copies of everything. So definitely appreciated the local comic shop, and it was called Diamond Comics. It was their last name, and that's what they went with. I mean, it's a great name of a comic shop. And it's funny, the villain in my book, who is this guy I'm calling Diamond. So it's my tip of the hat to my old comic shop that I went to all the time. And it was there that, I first became aware of personal computers for the home. They had an Atari there. And, I used to randomly work there, clean up and organize and whatnot, as one does. And that was a hell of a lot of fun. And he'd give me, discounts off of the latest batch of comics I would pick up. But as soon as he got the Atari and had it in his shop and it was, on, and he allowed me to play around with it. His name was Lou. It was Lou Diamond. Not Lou Diamond Phillips. Completely other guy. But yeah, I started playing around with it. I made my first digital art way back when. You could look up when the Atari computer came out. That was, I think, around the time that the Wolverine miniseries came out, that Frank Miller did, and there's the iconic cover that everybody has drawn at some point or another of Wolverine with his claws out. And that's what I drew on the computer. I guess I saved it. Either I saved it or I did it in one sitting. And the graphics weren't that good back then, so it was blocky, but it was pretty close to the original cover. I mean, it wasn't a complicated cover. Face, hand, and claws. But that was my first taste of drawing on a computer. Eventually I sold a bunch of my X-Men comics and got one of the Atari computers for myself. That I got it from the comic shop. They expanded beyond comics and started selling computers. So that was a lot of fun, and I played around with the computer. I wouldn't say I did programming, but I would copy code from a back of magazine, and it would be a game. So it was the early days of computers. Um, Originally, I had a cassette drive. Oh my god, so long ago. But eventually, you got a disk drive because cassette drive it took incredibly long to load anything. So I was happy to get the floppy drive, which is also so old at this point. Computers have come a long way. I'm not even into my my work days, but so I appreciate if you're listening to this. But yeah, I mean, this is all leading up. Like once, yeah, I was in college. I got into computers. I got into writing. I actually tried to write a novel. Um, I wrote the hell out of the first batch of chapters, and then rewrote them, rewrote them, and rewriting them meant that I was adding to them. So I didn't have an outline, and the first, let's say six chapters became a novel unto themselves. It was definitely a learning lesson, a lesson I learned, not necessarily while doing it, but um, I think I learned a lot just by doing it, and uh, I shelved it, and I never did anything more with it, but it was definitely a fun experience. I learned that I could sit for hours and just write. Um, you know, I've learned since then that I just needed more direction on what I should be writing. Like, don't go back and rewrite. Just write forward and write it out. Get it done. But yeah, so college was fun. Getting into computers was fun. Getting into writing was fun. At this point, I read a lot of things because of school, as you do. I had a number of books at home, but they were sort of like my book collection started with like gifts I would get, and a lot of them from my parents. I remember when I was really young, there's a book that they had, like, they ordered, and it's something that you can specifically like, they had a list of things that you can sort of go over and add your own personal uh, options to. And I got one of those books, and it was like, the characters. One of the characters in it was Peter. One of the characters in it was Retep, which was my name backwards. It's funny, my brother Tony still remembers that. Probably all my brothers. It was just one of those cool, fun gifts. Um, and yeah, I read Hardy Boys. I don't know, just like a lot of kids' books. But it wasn't until I came across a paperback, um, which had a big impact into what I would be reading. That my brother had. My brother Jimmy, who was living in the basement. I think Jimmy and Anthony, my next brother up, are living in the basement bedroom. Um, And yeah, it was Jimmy's copy of The Shining, in paperback form, that had a special foil cover. So shiny, it caught my eye, and I took it and and eventually just read it and kept it as mine. And that influenced not only the fact that I only picked up paperbacks. uh, Back then my eyes were pretty darn good, and I just loved the fact that I could take the train into the city, and read a chapter or two, and yeah, it's like train rides would get very boring for me. Not much of a talker in the subway. I never like to talk above any racket, so definitely it wouldn't be a place for me to talk, but I could read and get into my own head universe that way. I rarely read comic books on the train. Um, I I just considered them special and just wanted to um, read them at home. Usually, just like lie down on my bed and read them, or eventually I'd have my own desk, read them at my desk. But yeah, it's that was the first of many of what I would personally pick up for myself. Like I said, I read a lot for school, but now I could choose what I read. And it's weird, like not being a big horror fan in those years. I did wind up picking up a lot of horror, and that was my love of Stephen King mostly. But I picked up Clive Barker. I picked up other things, but I guess I gravitated to sci-fi a lot, and Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov. Yeah, all the sci-fi authors of that time, Ray Bradbury, blah, 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 blah. So, okay, to make this part shorter, the reason I mentioned all that, like, I did a ton of reading. I read a ton of paperbacks, and I wanted to be a writer, but it's really taken me this long to get into like actually doing something and putting out my own work that will be my writing, which be this book, Retro. But yeah, it's like I went to art school and I got into other stuff, and like, school is finished and you gotta earn a living. Parents weren't going to carry me all my life. Middle class family, and I eventually got a job as a messenger. I loved walking, and I loved doing something that helped people, and messengers seemed like a logical thing, and I got to walk all around Manhattan, which is something I love doing anyway, but I can actually make money doing it. So that was awesome. Um, and with all this art school behind me, I loved it. I was one of those guys that, it's like I loved it so much that I didn't see myself earning money from it. So, it was kind of, weird thought. Like, why would you do all that? um, but that's the path I initially chose. You know, when I was done with college, I was in my 20s, and my 20s were consisted of a lot of getting into video games too, and getting into, hang out with friends a lot and partying and all that sort of youth stuff. So a lot of not so productive days. I worked my day job and I did a lot of, at the end of the day, nothing else. um, and, I honestly thought I would not find a sort of passion in life that would propel me the way that comics has done. Um, and the, all it took was that I basically went from messenger to mailroom. I spoke on oh, pretty much everything career wise, but um, I went from being a messenger to being an inside messenger, working for a specific company, delivering mail inside the company, to working for mailrooms, and worked for a bunch of different ones. Then eventually ran a mailroom, even though it was myself. It was, a company of, I don't know, 1,200 people or something. Um, and I worked in a number of sort of popular Manhattan buildings, for a number of popular New York companies. One of them was Dancer Fitzgerald and Sample, which was the second largest advertising company at the time. Um, and that was pretty awesome. And that was working in the Chrysler building. I worked in the Citicorp building. I worked in the World Financial Center building, and indirectly, I worked at I delivered in the World Trade Center. All sorts of areas, Wall Street area. Loved Manhattan. Loved that I got to walk around it so much. Loved the crowds. And things have changed. It's like now I'm living in Kentucky, and you know, like visiting nature more than other people. But I have my babies, my cats, so animals are on my list too. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, I mean, it's like I was working my day job, and I didn't think I would really find something I was utterly passionate about doing for a living. Um, Still love comics. I mean, I've been through my various stages where I would pick them up all the time, or I would take a break from them and not, you know, not see them for a while. But somewhere in 1991, my brother knew that I was working my day job, but wasn't pulling in a ton of money. He was like, "Hey, you want to make a couple of bucks?" A friend of mine asked me to help him work on a comic. Yeah, you want to join us? You just have to fill in some blacks, easy peasy. And I was like, sure. And that night was the night that I went up to Mobile with him, and we worked on an issue of Ghost Rider. I was filling in blacks. Jimmy was doing some figure inks. Another guy, Ken Branch, was doing some background inks. And the artist himself, Mark Texier, was just flying through pages, penciling random things, and inking things, and eating eating donuts and drinking coffee like a madman, because the book was due the very next morning. And yeah, I was just filling in blacks, and I was doing a pretty good job at that. Jimmy supplied me with the ink and brush, and we were all sitting in a Marvel bullpen, and this was after hours. This would be impossible to take place nowadays. There's no security. Nobody questioned why we were there. Nobody was even there. And it changed my life, because it took me all but 10 minutes of working on Ghost Rider pages and looking around at the offices of Marvel. I collected Marvel comics since I was young, and very impressed of their offices. And there's editorial offices all around. I was sitting in the bullpen, which is like cram packed with crap computers and paperwork and stuff in progress. And there was posters all around the place, and this is Marvel Comics, where they created everything. It took all but 10 minutes for me to make a decision that, hey, this is what I want to do for a living. And much like my brother at the time, that I figured my way in would be to become an anchor. I knew I wouldn't be great off the bat. I even if I was a messenger and then eventually working in a mailroom, I still drew. It's like I've been drawing all my life. And I proceeded to work a couple of years, working on independent comics, and trying to improve my skills, because I knew off the bat I was pretty crappy inker. All right, 1 second. Okay. My first published full book was from Personality Comics, and that was a DeForest Kelley issue. Personality Comics did, the real story of actors, but there was like a collection of ones associated with Star Trek, and I got you know, the Doctor's issue, and that was a lot of fun and challenging, and some of it came out great, for my skills at the time. Some of it was not so great, as with a lot of my early work, it wasn't consistent. um, and my skills were what they were, but I learned, I got better, and my philosophy was always, and remains so, like that. I just need to keep busy. I just need to get the next gig. I've always wanted to, and I'm sure this is true of me, sort of dictate how I want my career to go, but is yet to you know actually happen as you wish it. Um, but it's like now more than ever before, it's like I'm trying to steer my career in to a specific path. Um, but it's like you work for any company, you can't dictate what book you work on, unless you're a big name. And I've never been what I consider a big name. People know me, people know my work, people like my work. At least that's what they tell me. Um, but unless you're working on the top books, you're not going to really get a choice. So a lot of my early years was working on independent comics. So a lot of stuff that you wouldn't know, like one of the guys I hooked up with to do some work on his book, or books, was this guy Barry Blair, and Barry Blair did a lot of sort of elf comics, and I was a big fan of ElfQuest, so I was like, that won't be too bad. His comics weren't anywhere near as good as ElfQuest, but he did a book called Elfwood, and I was aware that there was this artist, Dale Keown, who was making a name for himself, that worked on a couple issues, I think, at least. And I was very impressed with Dale's work, and so by association, I was like, well, if what I'm right now isn't as good as what Dale did, but Barry made that happen, so maybe eventually, he'll do something as good. But no, Barry did a lot of very raw looking, very indie comics, as a lot of indie comics were back then. So it was the experience. I worked for a lot of no-name publishers or self-publishers back then, but it didn't matter. It's like I made my couple of pennies here and there, and I got more experience. I had more of a portfolio of past work, and you just go from job to job. And it's like I was focused entirely on just improving my work and getting better at what I did, and meeting other creators and small publishers at conventions. And I forget chronologically how things transpired, but at some point I did get a couple of pages from Marvel, some Punisher work. Well, the first thing was Marvel Comics Presents is an Iron Fist story. So I had had a page or a few pages of that. I remember that specifically because my first check was from Marvel, was from that work, and I remember getting it. Well, I went up to the office to get the check. The benefit of living in New York, and back in the day when Marvel and DC were both there, and they're willing to let you up there and walk around and talk with editors, see if they had any work, yada yada yada, but also be able to pick up your check was freaking awesome. And of course, it being Marvel, you can go to the bank and cash it right away. You don't have to wait for that. But I remember getting my first check from a Marvel gig. And it was like probably less than $200, more than $100. But calling my friend there's a phone booth on the corner, and essentially jumping up and down and saying, "Spider-Man's on my check." And it was pretty awesome. But I did get a couple of random Punisher pages, like maybe Punisher Annual and something else, maybe a regular issue, I forget. But yeah, just it's always great, not only to get some work for Marvel, but also to be doing inks over more professional pencilers. I worked on a lot of indies. Let me tell you, they have no clue. Not only how to professionally pencil a page, but just like the basics. Like the paper was horrible a lot of the times, so that's always a struggle for me as an inker, to be working on crappy paper. That they wouldn't even use a ruler when doing their borders, and so the art looked very different after I was finished with it, in a good way, and it was more of a chore because of that, because they just didn't have the basics down, and if I was lucky enough to work with a penciler on more than one book, I tried to work with them to say, hey, if you do this will, make it look even better. It'll be easier for me to work on it, and so on and so forth, and always steered them in the direction of getting better paper and using like a ruler and French curve, and and not just freehanding everything. Because it was nuts to like a lot of the work I had to work on, and this was like both before and and after my Marvel DC work. So one of my earliest sweet gigs, and something that really stands with me to this day, even though I only went there, I was there like between 8 months and a year. So I wasn't there for a long time, but the setup was so sweet that it had a big impact on me. And that was when I went to work for Valiant. And this was shortly after Jim Shooter and Barry Smith left, which I would have loved to have been there when they were there. So Bob Layton was in charge. Don Perlin was there. And a lot of great people. A lot of great writers, artists, inkers, colorists. Everybody working there. Fred Pierce, who, what is he, president of the new sort of Valiant? He's a super nice guy. And my time there was as a background anchor. And for however phenomenal it was, I eventually left because I wanted to be inking books, not backgrounds. And, it started really getting to me. Because it was a 9 to 5 job. I worked there Monday to Friday, 5 days a week, 9 to 5. As a regular, like it was a regular job, and everybody was like 98% of the people were in the office. There were a few artists they allowed to, for some reason, ink must be caught on my quill. There were a few artists that worked from home and refused to work in the office, but it was a very much like corporate office setup in that everybody went there, worked 9 to 5, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I was just surrounded by other artists working, and it was very, very, very inspirational. Most of the time. A lot of the times when everybody got really goofy, it was distracting, but for the most part, they kept a tight ship there. People got work done. But yeah, so that had a lot of large impact in that, it's like I would love to have that kind of a setup of my own one day, and that, I'm not there yet. But yeah, I love working there. There's a lot of learned a ton. Definitely improved my skills when I was working there. So I'm pretty sure I worked on a book called Razer for London Night Studios before I started working there. I know while I was working there, I was also working on Razer, in the evenings and weekends. Because I've always been, for the most part, somebody who worked all the time, for better or worse. But it was because of my time at Valiant that I made good friends with Jim Calfrey, among a handful of other people working there. But it was sometime later that Jim was working on Aquaman. Well, he was a fill-in artist, and he had an inker, but the inker was quite busy himself. So when Calfari was given another issue of Aquaman to pencil, he knew and the editor knew that they needed to find another inker, and because I used to show him my work up at Valiant all the time, and he saw my work improve, he thought of me. The editor got in touch with me. Then I spoke with Calfuri, and there was FedEx involved as things went back then. Calfuri re-penciled some Aquaman panels for me to ink as a test. I don't always do that. Sometimes it's a time thing. I'm too busy currently to do samples for like specific samples for publishers. It's never been just an ego thing, although, really, it's like I I knew, like, as soon as I finished inking that first issue of Aquaman, that pretty much I could do majority of what anybody ever asked for. Although I've done plenty of samples since then. But it's just one of those things, a lot of times I got paid for doing samples, so didn't totally mind, but it's kind of like, well, nobody will ever see that. um, but, then I can also sell them too. So you get something out of it. But yeah, so, I've gone into this story a lot deeper in the past. It's actually a video I have where I talk about specifically the first issue of Aquaman I worked on. You can go check out on my channel. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely grueling. I spent, if not a month, maybe a little bit over a month, inking that first issue, because I wanted to elevate my talent, give Cal Fury what exactly panel by panel what he was looking for as far as the inks went, do my best job, impress the editor up at DC, and wanted to get more work. That was truly my first real out and out professional gig. Like I said, I've done a few pages for Marvel, but it wasn't like anything. They were happy with what I've done on those pages, but they didn't hire me for a book based off of any of that. And a lot of people know, but in case you didn't, I was on Aquaman for relatively 24 issues. Not all of them full issues, but not all of them did I do covers for. Did a bunch of covers, inked a bunch of covers. But very proud of that gig. It was 3 or 4 years from start to finish. One of those years we did consistently every issue because we were given a 1-year contract, and that was my first contract. Well, first and only. And yeah, I freaking loved it. At the same time, it was very grueling working on a monthly book. Definitely took it out of me. I had the option, like my last issue was 48. I had the option to do work on 49. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm done. I need to take a break. The first issue we worked on was issue 10. Super proud of that issue. Then it was like, randomly 15. We were filling teams. So then 21, then we were like more regular, then we were regular. And then, we 48 being my last issue and 49 being Cal Fury's last issue. Issue 50 was a whole new team. But our run had that much of an impact where the movie, you could tell, was inspired by it. So that's always nice. And because of the movie, they printed a trade of actually the issues I worked on, and I believe that's Aquaman book 2, whatever they called it. It was, like the Peter David issues, which book 1 had his miniseries, and probably book 2 picked up when me and Cal Fury were working on the book. And I got some money for that, so that was nice. Because the initial contract we signed while on the book was that we would never get a royalty. But so they gave us a new contract and said, this is the way it is now. So get money for working on something decades earlier. It was pretty nice. And I'm yapping. So my Marvel work happened shortly thereafter. I tried to get something else going at DC. Nobody was having it. Unfortunately, I didn't know the other editors as well, even though I'd walk around and say hi and network, as they say, and I forget who's where, when, yada yada. But I before I, well, let's see. When I was working on just independent comics randomly, I remember taking trips into Marvel and DC randomly, drop off pages for my brother, and I would, try to talk to editors and show them what I was doing at the time if I had copies of it, and always trying to get my own work. But after Aquaman happened, I got one or two random small things. Maybe like an Aquaman drawing from that they might have used in DC's Who's Who's. That would be, like DC character, sort of character sheet comic, what they did back when. So it'd be like little small stuff. Mostly the only thing I've done at DC was Aquaman, but there's a couple little things. So then, I really started looking hardcore at Marvel and still trying to pick up any indie work or, what have you. I guess because of the success of me working on Aquaman, it's like I did get a bunch of Marvel work, but it was mostly a lot of random stuff. It was just the ever of what was happening at Marvel, that they were willing to have teams of artists and inkers on every single book. So a lot of what I got at Marvel was all mutant related. They had 10 or 20 titles, and I worked on anything from Gambit to Deadpool to what am I thinking? Cable, Uncanny X-Men, Wolverine. I think I did a lot of random Wolverine pages. And that it was like excellent at the same time as like kind of lame. And I said earlier, it's like I always wanted to steer my career, and I would have loved just to work on one freaking title. So I spoke about my time at Marvel a number of times. Um, I definitely appreciated all the work. I was always happy to just be working. Um, you know, I always gave my best. But at the end of the day, is if I was, you know, if I was laying bricks, then I was feeding my family, which was, me and whoever I was dating or whatever pets I had or what have you at any point in time. Um, but above and beyond, like I would say, it was a good 7 years where I was working for DC, then I was working for Marvel. But then that ran dry. Um, I was up at Marvel so often that um, I was there during the Marvel Knights era and all the excitement with my brother and Joe running a branch of the company, um, which was an office they had on top of the roof of Marvel, and it was pretty wild time. And my greatest gig and actually my Marvel downfall was getting to work on a book called Marvel Boy. I don't think I publicly talked about this previously. I never got credit, which is fine. um, but it was one of those gigs that I was actually absolutely floored to be asked to work on, and um, and then absolutely devastated afterwards when it didn't work out. Um, I did do some work on it, but I was never credited. In the end, I might have worked on 6 pages, maybe a little more, um, and not full pages. I think some of the pages were just the figures were already inked. So here's the deal. Um, it was Grant Morrison writing a miniseries. Marvel Boy was like supposed to be. I think at the time it was supposed to be the first Marvel character or some sort of thing. I forget now. Um, they were recreating history to a certain extent. Anyway, it was Grant freaking Morrison. It was penciled and partially inked until I'm on. I didn't join um, with page one, but I think I was given page 5 or something or other. Anyway, it was drawn by J.G. Jones, who at that point was already a phenomenal artist, and he did some Marvel Knights stuff. And I forget Marvel Boy was Marvel Knights or whatever, but um, uh, yeah. So like J.G. Jones was the artist, and he became aware, JG, and the editorial became aware. Excuse me. that he was going too slow to fully pencil and ink himself on the book, and that they would need an inker. And the reason I was blown away was not only did my brothers say I was right for the job and offer it to me, but Joe Casado said I was right for the job and offered it to me. And you know, I Jimmy's my brother, but you know, he was inking like mad. He was part of Molten Knights. You know, it's like I always admired, you know, his work ethic. Um, and he's a little older than me, and I'll always be his kid brother. But yeah, for him to say anything is it's not 100% unusual, but it's got to be something outstanding that I do that, you know, he becomes aware of. Now, Joe, on the other hand, probably at that time never said. Well, he not that he probably never said anything, but very, you know, very few times had I heard him praise anything um, by anyone who, you know, wasn't like a big name or something. So yeah, I got to work on a couple of pages of Marvel Boy, um, and the reason it became my demise is like, you know, I did a couple of pages, inked those, and then this is where it became twisted. Um, I received the next batch of pages, and I didn't see J.G. Jones around, so I knew off the bat that he didn't really want an inker. And but like, you know, I knew it also would be like this would be the gig that would change my career, and unfortunately it was. um and you know, I spent a long time on those first batch of pages. I think I did a dynamite job. My brother liked it. Joe liked it. You know, Joe's wife was editing from all. I could swear it's a Mall Knights book. So she liked it, and then you know, she was only when I went to pick up the next batch of pages. She was the only one around, unfortunately, and they had the figures inked. And it was just one of those things, like, you know, the wind went out of my sails right off the bat. You know, my brother tried to put a positive spin on it. Like when I talked to him later, like, you know, JG doesn't like anybody's inks on his work, which, you know, it's like, I know pencilers, I understand that. But at the same time, it's like I was getting this opportunity, kinda. And so I had the next batch of pages, and I didn't sit on them, but I kind of like took a little long on them. And it's completely my bad. But it's I already saw the signs. I already saw the fact that regardless of how well I do on this, um, that I'm going to wind up not on the book, and that's pretty much what happened. I think J.G. Jones inked himself on it, and yeah, I was done with that project. And that really crushed me, to be totally honest. And it's like I was probably done for the most part working for Mole. I just it's like, well, if this can happen, then I got no confidence in anything. It's like it's like I want to work on a project and be proud of working on a project, but if they can pull it out of out from under me at any time, then that's fucked up, and I'm done. I went back to work on independent comics. It's like I might have. I know. Like when work dried up, I might have still had my heart like turning things around up at Marvel. I forget exactly how it all went down, but I was pretty much confident that I wasn't going to get any top tier books any time after that. And it really burned me. This shit happens, but I didn't take it well. I didn't take it well at all. And I didn't even get credited for what I did do. Not even a mention. And if you ever find the Marvel Boy books, look for the page where there is a lot of cityscape, at least in one panel. And J.G. Jones is like the villain or the hero, I forget who, in the book, burns like, I'm not sure if it was like the character's eyes had laser vision or something, but they burned like city block buildings, and it read, if you were in a plane or in the sky, it read "fuck you" across the city that were burned away. So you could look it up. I worked on that page and probably a couple before and after, or whatever, however that worked out. But anyway, so that project didn't work out. I know when work dried up at DC for me, that editors started recommending I do proposals. So, as I mentioned, like I was still working on independent comics at the time. I was doing a couple things for my friend Joe Martino. He had a character, Shadow Flame, and later Ripper Man. And I was doing some stuff for my friend Dave Ryan. He had a comic Penance, which was like the most fabulous indie comic launch I ever been a part of. When we were done with Penance issue 1, which I only did part of because he started it and wanted me to finish it. He put together a launch for it in a Manhattan bar called Fiddlesticks. So it was an Irish bar, and we both had invited friends, and he made up not only T-shirts but sort of like G-strings for women. With the company logo on it. So yeah, we were both wearing Red Anvil shirts, and we had just stacks of the comic at the party, and and my brother and Amanda were dating at the time, so they were both there. Jimmy brought Garth Ennis. I just had a lot of friends from Marvel and from just various, my indie comic creators, friends there, and of course, friend Joe was there, and just friends. It was a great time, and we all got drunk and had a blast. Did a signing at a comic store in Bayonne. Was it before or after the party? At some point. But yeah, I guess, I had finished working on Razer. I did a bunch of random issues. Probably one of the last things I did was working on the Razer Annual, and it had a backup that was done by Bill Tucci, or was it the full issue? However it went, you can look it up. It was she, Bill Tucci's character, she, and Razer, and Everett Hartsough swears that was the first appearance of she, and I tend to believe that because I think that came out before issue 1 of she. Anyway, I inked the last batch of pages of that over Billy, and Billy's, to my knowledge, still, I guess he's done a lot of stuff for DC, so maybe not. But at that time, there was nobody inking Bill but Bill, and I got to ink a bunch of those pages with both she and Razer in it, and that was very cool. I inked a couple other random things. I did I don't think it wasn't for Gambit, the Marvel X-Men character, but it was for something like Billy did a specials something that had a Gambit cover on it. I forget if it was trade cards. I have no clue. Some kind of weird thing you could probably look up. Anyway, I was going to get into so as work dried up at DC and later at Marvel, the editors tried to convince me that doing proposals was the only way to get work. And I guess I'm glad I did them. I did a bunch of different ones with different friends. Like, we would get together and present ourselves as a team, and either a lot of times we would do artwork, samples for the proposed project. I think one of them was, if not Young Avengers, some sort of thing like that. But nothing ever hit. Didn't get anything from zilch from DC, zilch from Marvel. Like when inking work dried up at Marvel, there were a couple of times afterwards, and we're talking like early 2000s, where I would fancy the idea of possibly getting work from all over DC again. Um, but for the most part, I was set in not knowing what I was going to do, but working elsewhere. I didn't know. It took me a long time to figure out that, you know, what my path would be. And I did other stuff. I was part of a radio show back in New York, and specifically in Long Island. We would go to an actual radio station, and I was a co-host of a group of people. Did a comic book related show where I would look up, I would look for news and it was available at that time back in magazines and stuff, and talk about it. So essentially, steal present, current news. Um, this is all pre-internet or early internet. Early internet, I think. So I guess I did go to websites and stuff. But yeah, I was working. There were like comic book collectives I was part of. And there's CAG, Comic Book Artists Guild. The only award I ever won was through them, and that was for Distortions Unlimited, which was a comic I inked that was penciled entirely on wood blocks. And my God, that that package arriving was heavy, and shipping back then was a lot more inexpensive. But for something like shipping 22 or slightly more panels of wood was expensive. So yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily quality inks, but it was definitely a challenging, fun gig, because the ink bled into those wood panels like you wouldn't believe, and but I enjoyed it, and I'm glad I got an award for it. For something, for anything, like inking related. Because I worked on my skill for years and years and years, and I don't think I can ink anyone, but I am flexible. I could ink a wide range of pencilers, and I believe in my skill. Even though life will push you down at any chance it gets. But yeah, so after like Mullen DC proposals didn't go anywhere, and I was sort of like drifting around with various friends and comic collectives. At one point, there was a group of friends, and we were working on a book, and we'd meet up in Manhattan at the local Hooters, because that's what you do. And it's always fun to hang out with like-minded people. But it's like I guess at that time I was getting into computers, learning about. It was very limited in the early days. There was MySpace, and that seemed to be it. I think I had an email and MySpace, and that seemed to be the online world. But it's like learning about that and learning about how to work computers and how online works and meeting new people that way. Initially, I was incognito on MySpace, but eventually, presented myself as my true self. Initially, I was Peter Pop, and still remembered as that from back then, which is kind of funny. I was initially there to pick up chicks, as you do on MySpace. Um, but as the world, expanded with Facebook, Facebook changed everything. And I remember, I was living in Staten Island at the time, and I knew a girl who was in college, and she's the first one who mentioned Facebook. It is this thing. It's exclusive to just college students right now, but I hear they're opening it up to the public slowly. And so, I think I've pretty much been on Facebook since they went public. So I was pretty much there at the very beginning, kind of, sort of. I wasn't in school at the time, so I wasn't there when the initial people were there. But I loved Facebook back then. It's still useful today, but it's not always fun. But um, I guess I got long enough, and I see there's a number of comments. I wonder if it's just people saying hi. So let me go take a quick look at that. Oh my god. Um, all right. So EJB, you've said that you inked some books later when Valiant was purchased by Acclaim. Did it feel like a very different company? Um, yeah, actually is one of the things I had in mind to mention. Early 2000s, I inked a miniseries, and that was me and Jim Calfury. So it was like me working on a Valiant book, and for the first time inking Calfury on a Valiant book. This was after, of course, Aquaman. Um, and that was the On Marines. Did it feel like a different company? Definitely. Because I really touched base with the company. Cal Fury. I think Cal Fury just mailed me the pages directly. Like a lot of the times when I was working Marvel DC, the penciler would ship the pages to the company, and then the company would ship the pages to me. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe when I was doing On Marines that Cal Fury was shipping the pages directly to me. And then initially I got the covers. I think we finished off the covers first, and then it was, I think it was a 4-issue miniseries, and that was tied in with the video games. I believe All Means, maybe it was made, but I don't think it was. But um, it was set to go after Turok, or something to that effect. Maybe it happened. I forget how it went down, but uh, I was very satisfied with the books themselves that we did. But I think by the time they released them, that era of the company was over. So there wasn't really a lot of fanfare or promotion. Um, I'm just going off what I remember. Um, but I was very happy with the quality of the books. That it's like you got to remember, like when I was working at Marvel in DC, that was uh oh, well, definitely like when I was working at Aquaman, which was a lot, before most of my work at Marvel, they were just starting to get into fancier coloring. It might have been just the beginning of computer coloring. Um, and I barely remember like the stuff I inked at Marvel, whether it was computer colored or any good or whatever. I'm almost always not totally behind the way things are colored. um, but I seem to remember I was pretty happy with the results of the Armorines miniseries, at least the quality of the book at the end of the day. I know I was happy with the quality of the book, just like based on what me and Cal Fury did. And yeah, it was fun to revisit them. Um, but yeah, it's like I didn't know anybody working there. I'm pretty sure I didn't visit the office, and I just received paychecks in the mail, something to that effect. So it was nowhere near the same experience or the same company, from my perspective. So, excellent question. So let me just show what I'm talking about. That was his question. Um, and because the tone of books they were putting out was definitely different from a reader's perspective. Uh, yeah, I mean, what later era Valiant put out was definitely like there was a very distinctive look and feel and focus to the comics that Valiant put out when I was working there with Bob Layton and crew. Um, that was back when they were um, watercoloring the artwork by hand, and just sort of photostating that, and then that would be the printed result. And it wasn't even though like a lot of talent went into the artwork, there was nothing fancy about any book to a certain degree. Joe St. Pierre um, was pushing the boundaries artistically a bit. I mean, I love his work. I loved Sean Chen's work, of course, Jim Calfury, and I'm friends in a small degree with all of them. And and but like the printed finished books looked a little similar because a very specific kind of way the cover of the books. Anyway, like the later image books were flashier because they had computer coloring, and that sort of really updated the look of the books, as well as the whole different mindset with the art that went into them. When Bob Layton was in charge, he was carrying over what Barry Smith sort of invented, um, with the looks of the book, and um, yeah, it was very specific. Like nothing flashy, nothing. Like the farthest from like a sort of Marvel comic. But I love, especially working up there. I love seeing all the artwork as it developed and went into it, and there's a lot of phenomenal artists up there. Even though like the books did look similar at the end of the day. But yeah, definitely when Next Generation um, Valiant was happening. Much different tone, like you said, from the reader's perspective. And then we have Russ, comic book black belt. 829, still 200 ahead of me. Go subscribe to Comic Book Black Belt. We're both trying to get to 1,000. That's then we get a newcomer, Cadbo 429. Wow, I've never been to this channel before. That's cool. Oh, thanks for coming, checking out, and hope you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can watch more. Then we have greetings from Hex Allen Comics. Greetings, Hex Allen. Then Russ coming at us with a Kirby quote. Comics break your heart, kid. Ain't it the truth? Then Hex, hopefully you're still around. Why was it penciled on wood blocks? Well, that was something the penciler wanted to attempt because he did a lot of wood burning at the time, and he was also penciling comics. He decided to attempt to do something, in combining both. And he penciled. He's like, he asked me. He was like, "What do you think about me penciling wood blocks and you inking them?" And I told him off the bat, I was like, "I never inked a wood block. I don't think it's going to be the same as inking paper. But I think we can get a good result out of it. So I say go for it." And so he did. That was Daniel Krissinger, and Distortions Unlimited was the comic. There's a mini series. I forget the publisher, but that was a fun book. It was a combination. It was a tie-in. There's the name of it, Distortions Unlimited, is actually a company that does horror makeup. And so it was, friends of Daniel's that, that they got to talking and came up with an idea to do a comic using their name, and it would be horror related, so it would be theme related, yada, yada, yada. One hand helps the other. But that was a lot of fun to do. That was a hoot and a laugh. Even though it was, man, it was challenging to work on because, you see me inking here, and I got my hand resting on the desk, and we're talking, like the wood wasn't that thick, but it was at least this thick. And so, like, as I inked off the page, it would be, floating in the air. So it was definitely for that regard. And like I said, the fact that it's soaked in. Also, the fact that everything was brush. I could not possibly ink it with quill. It was all brush. And so, it was challenging. It wasn't impossible. It was great, fun experiment. And me and Daniel had a blast doing it. And like I said, I get an inking award from it. So I'm glad I got some recognition for it. As well as, that was pretty much a more a inking award for just my whole career of inking, more than specifically that book, really. Um, but yeah, that was fun. Um, let's see. EJB, thanks so much for the reply. It's really interesting to hear your insider's perspective. Ah, thank you, and I appreciate you enjoying it. Is it the book that kind of looks like the necromancer? Necrocon. I think I found it. Yeah. Actually, the was it? It was the trade. The trade. It was collected and made into a trade, and I guess it was both Daniel and actually that the company Distortions Unlimited that sort of created a rubberized cover that looked like the book from Evil Dead. So that was pretty even more of a wild project to be a part of. Um, and I had that crazy cover at one point. Um, but after moving a bunch of times and whatnot, it never really um, it's kind of difficult to put on your bookshelf with a rubberized cover. When I'm pretty much an organizational freak, and it was like always like this is way different than everything else on the shelf. I got to get rid of it. I don't know. I gave it to somebody or something. But I kept the trade for like yeah. I was back in New York when I did that, I guess. So um so yeah, let's see. Catching up a little bit. So I guess I left off um in the early 2000s at some point. Um, I will also mention a good old friend of mine um, who was originally from New York and moved to California, was working on a book of his own creation called Valentine. Valentine was sort of a female assassin, and it was another sort of like black and white indie comic bad girl book. Um, and I assisted on a lot of those issues, and even did an ad for one of my own creations um, called Bright Eyes that still really hasn't seen the light of day, even though I posted a bunch of pages. I started doing it as a webcomic online and just didn't do more than a few pages. But it is a project I will be getting back to one day. And that will be my answer to this sort of bad girl comics. Um, it's like I liked a lot of them, and I always thought, I would love to sort of touch on this material myself, but give it sort of my slant, the way I would do it. And Bright Eyes is inspired by that, but it's also inspired by an old friend of mine from New York, Maya, who actually at one point was my assistant back in the day. I've had a number of different ones, three or four. Um, definitely three who were good. A couple that weren't that. I only had for a very very short time. Um, but yeah, so Valentine was a book that you know I worked on from time to time, helping Dan out. Um, mentioned Joe, mentioned Dave. Um, mention collectives I was a part of, CAG being one of them. It was something else. It didn't really have a name, but there was you go through various friends at different times in your life, and my journey from the earliest days of working in comics to now, I've gone through a bunch. But I would definitely say like life took a different turn when I started, you know, getting into computers and being online and acting with, you know, interacting with other people online. And I've met all new artists and writers and creators and self-publishers. And because of that, I've been part of various other collectives. One specifically, was a big one. Was Kevin Cross started 100 Days of Making Comics, and that became a whole group. And I was part of that. And last year, they did a book two, of which I wrote, penciled, and inked my first ever published story that I did all three on. And super proud of that. It was a 4-page story. And possibly the only writing I've had published. Although I've been on plenty of things. I've worked with so many creators throughout the years, and as you can expect, people always looking for advice. And I've helped people with their comics and giving them direction and help them with their artwork. And it's more like just suggestions I throw out there. But there's plenty of stuff out there that I never got credit for, and that's fine. It's like I've given out a lot of free advice throughout the years, and I'm still willing to do that as time allows and all that. But that's just goes to say uh, you know, while it's my official writing and penciling. It's a story where I wrote, penciled, and inked totally, and that was published. I've since then done my second, which was a thing called Stratus, for a book called Saving the Universe. And I plan to do a lot more. And if you didn't know, this is Retro. With the second issue on, I'm going to be writing, penciling, inking, possibly coloring. But yeah, I plan to do that a lot with a lot of my creations. And Hex says here, Bright Eyes is a real catchy title. Thanks. I mean, one could say I got Bright Eyes from the song, but it's actually something I came up with, and and every time I hear the "Turn Around, Bright Eyes" that song, I think of it. I think of it. But yeah, so between the early 2000s and today, the overall arc of how things have gone down is that I have really entered the world of social networking online, and what that has started at and become. So that's been a learning curve, and not only that, but I see it as as a bus, for somebody who was inking so long as I have, and that was literally 99% of what I was doing, to then turn my brain around and consider, you know, um, penciling and writing and possibly self-publishing my own comics. I've really taken my time in order to learn all I have learned. I still have plenty to learn. But that has consumed a lot of my time in the last 10, 15 years. But I've continued to work on, inking projects for other people. And also something else I've done before, I've done more in recent years, which is make my own artwork, so doing commissions or making artwork and selling it. And just, overall working online, and being part of a lot more different groups. And steering myself towards, my bigger vision. And it took me years to figure out not only what I wanted to do, but what concrete shape that would take. And, retro is the beginning. And it will be a lot more characters, and it'll be its own small universe, and I'll be publishing all of it. As well as doing one-shots and some graphic novels, and maybe publishing for other people as well. We'll see. But, it's like I'm in no rush for the big picture to happen tomorrow. I'm taking my time, going step by step, learning more as I go, and having fun as I do it. This past year has been excruciatingly hard for myself, as it has for a lot of other people, because of just, life changes and so many people passing away, and it's been horrible. Business wise, the economy is crap. But I've been surviving, and that's the main thing. Like I mentioned early in the video, the stream, I do have posts on my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for a fire sale. If you're interested in really supporting me and want to buy some artwork, please check it out. There's a Dropbox link that I'm keeping updated of a pile of artwork that I have, both comic pages and random artwork. If you like anything, message me anywhere. And yeah, we'll work it out and get it in your hands. You could also support me by becoming a patron if you haven't already. Please like this video, subscribe if you haven't. But this has been a great, fun episode. I can't believe I've gone over 2 hours. But because it took me about an hour to get into like the real story of what I wanted to do this episode. But this has been fun. Got a bunch more work done. Yeah, I'll be streaming again soon to give you more clarity on recent events. I didn't want to get into current events now. But I appreciate everybody checking out, everybody who commented in the chat. Thank you all for coming and watching live. And I'll see you again soon. So take care. Hope you're doing well on your own projects and being productive and staying alive and safe and all that jazz. Till next time. Peace.